Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we have something very special for all the Omega fans and Bond aficionados in the audience today. So if you guys have seen my reviews on some of the other Omegas, especially my, I guess, almost vintage now Omega Seamaster 253180 from the Pierce Brosnan era, you guys should all be pretty familiar with the Omega Planet Ocean as well. These things were first introduced in the era of the current Bond, the blonde Bond, Daniel Craig. And I have to say that when I first saw these on screen in Casino Royale and in later movies, I was very much hooked from the day I first saw them. It was very much love at first sight. And here today we're being able to look at a current version of this particular series, and this one is far and away the best of the bunch. What we have here is one featuring the in-house 8900 movement, which I'll talk more about in a bit. We have this beautiful ceramic bezel and ceramic dial, and the fit and finish and the quality on this watch, if you think about it in comparison to my old trusty Seamaster from the 90s, is literally night and day difference. It's amazing to see how far Omega has come, and this watch in person is absolutely stunning. The quality on this, it just very much feels like a quality luxury item, and that's not something I would have said about Omegas and every Omega that I've ever held, especially some of the more vintage ones. But this thing definitely feels like a quality product, and it is absolutely amazing to hold. So once again, I want to give a shout out to Bernard Watch. They've kindly lent me another one of their watches to play with, so they're continuing to feed my watch loving passion here. And I have to say that I'm so excited to check this thing out. You guys know that I love my old Seamaster, and this Planet Ocean is infinitely a better watch. So what you're looking at here today is the new Omega Seamaster Planet Ocean. This is going to be 600 meter depth resistance. That's 2,000 feet, which is crazy. I mean, back in the day when dive watches were 660 feet or 1,000 feet, we thought that was nuts. But this watch actually is good to 2,000 feet, far deeper than most owners will ever take it. And short of like a Rolex Deep Sea, this is more than enough depth rating for all but the absolutely hardened divers out there. But what makes this watch so special is just the attention to detail and the fit and finish that Omega has instilled in this since they've launched this line. You know, as I was mentioning earlier, this thing actually has ceramic, and I know that's kind of a trend. Rolex started that too with their current line of sports watches, including the Submariner and the GMT, but I have to say the ceramic on this particular Omega is really, really nice. The way that they've kind of etched in the markers for the traditional dive bezel, it feels very elegant. It's very refined in the way that it feels, and you can tell that it was made with the utmost quality. It's ZR02 is what they call this type of ceramic. It's a black ceramic, and I'll be honest, I can't speak to the chemical properties of it. I'm sure you guys, if you want to find out more, you can find out more online, but in person it feels absolutely spectacular. And I have to say too, I love the playfulness of this dial. I love how there's kind of traditional Arabic numerals here at 6, 9, and 12, and I love the little hints of orange. You know, when we first started seeing the Planet Oceans, they had the orange bezels on them, and I'll be honest and say that I'm one of those that really liked them, but I also like this as kind of an understated playfulness. There's, you know, just a lot of orange for those that are kind of really into something different. They'll be able to see the bits and pieces of the orange in the dial. It looks very, very cool. And as I was saying, the quality of this watch is just spectacular. Just feeling the case, everything about it, when you compare it to an old school Omega like mine, you can just tell leaps and bounds the difference. So, you know, this is a dive watch with a traditional dive bezel. I have to say that they've changed the bezel in terms of the grips. You know, one of my, I bickered about the fact that my old Seamaster with the scalloped edges was very hard to turn. This new one though is so much easier. Omega's finally fixed their bezels, and this thing is just so easy to manipulate. It turns with a solid precision. It's 120 clicks, which is standard these days, and it just moves so much better than the old Seamasters ever did. And I have to say I'm really happy to see that Omega's fixed that. So just a quick little overview. I know you guys are probably sick of me talking about this on my videos, but you just set the dot to the current minute hand, and as time elapses you'll be able to keep track of an event. Now if you're diving, this is important because you can keep track of your bottom time and keep sense of when you should go back to the surface or how long your oxygen could be lasting in theory if you're not using a dive computer, which I know most people would be using these days. And of course it is unidirectional, so you can only add time, you can't remove time, which is good. Of course, if you're timing something that could endanger your life, you don't want to mistakenly remove time from it. But again, this thing turns with such a precision, and it was something that was so absent in some of the older Omega dive watches that I'm really happy to see that they've addressed it. Now, as I was talking about my old trusty Seamaster, of course, they still have the helium escape valves. In this case, it's marked HE. Has a nicely different finish. It's very different from the rest of the case. It's kind of like a I don't know, like an anodized kind of look to it. It's hard to explain. As with the old school ones, it's a screw unscrew to let helium escape. I know that that's a very niche market that would need such a feature like that, but again, if you're into Bond movies, it's always the button that activates the gadgets. And I know some people think it's a love it or hate. I personally have always thought this was kind of a cool thing to put on the watch. Some manufacturers like Rolex have the valve that's built into the case itself. I kind of like something else to play with on my watches, so I appreciate that there's this little screw out here. Now, speaking of crowns, we of course have the traditional marked Omega crown. Again, the finishing on it is beautiful. You have these contrasting high polish of the Omega called out against this kind of brushed anodized looking surface. It's really nice. And we'll go ahead and unscrew it. Of course, it is a screw down crown being a dive watch. And first position is winding, and this thing turns with a really soft precision. It feels very refined. In some of these cheaper watches, you're going to turn it and you'll kind of hear like the kind of a clicking sound, and it just feels very almost like you're running it through sand. This very much feels different. It feels very much professional. And I have to say, it's a joy to behold. You'll also notice too that's really cool. If you pull out the crown again, you can actually independently adjust the hour hand. And that's wonderful if you're like me and you travel quite a bit and you change time zones. The fact that you can independently set the hour hand is a fantastic feature. And of course, you can just set the date that way as well. So if you're traveling, let's say from New York to LA, 3 time zones, you can easily swap the time zones without adjusting your time. So of course, the second hand keeps running and the minute hand is right where you left it. So it makes traveling a super easy endeavor, and you can keep track of different time zones on the fly. And of course, last position you'll see is hacking. The second hand is stopped. And of course, I can adjust the time here. We'll go ahead and roll it through. And the great thing about hacking is, of course, you can perfectly set the timekeeping. So what I typically do is I'll get the second hand to stop right up here at 12 o'clock. And then I will set the time to an atomic clock on my computer. And then as soon as the atomic clock on my computer, hits 0, I'll push the crown back in and I will synchronize it with my computer. And that way I can keep track of the accuracy of my watches. So we'll go ahead and screw the crown back in. Again, everything about this feels very refined. And part of that refinement is this new Omega in-house movement. Now, back in the days when I've showed you guys my older Omegas, especially my old Bond, that was a Cal 1120, and that was very much what Omega did for a lot of years. They would take Etta calibers, in my case a 2892, and they do a nice job of refining them. They would add some extra jewels, and they would do some nice finishing, and they were very much a nice movement. They were tried and true workhorse, and then later they added, of course, the coaxial feature, which I won't get into here, but coaxial is a pretty cool innovation itself, which I'll have to do a secondary video on. But they did all they could basically with that to caliber. Now they've gone completely in-house, and what you see here is truly an amazing in-house movement. It of course features the coaxial escapement, which Omega has been known for the last 10 years or so. And but the thing about this movement that's beyond special is that this is the first movement to get both METAS, and that is METAS, and COSC certification. And part of that extra METAS certification is this watch is actually anti-magnetic to 15,000 Gauss, which is a number that I can't imagine anybody would really have to worry about in real life. But if you guys have issues with your watches getting magnetized, you're definitely not going to have an issue with this Omega. Omega actually did a silicon balance spring in this watch, and they've actually ordered a couple anti-magnetic alloys, such as like the lever, the escape wheel, the balance, and the balance screws. So basically this watch is highly anti-magnetic, so if you're entering magnetic fields for your job or otherwise, it should not affect the accuracy of the watch. And as someone who's magnetized their watches on multiple occasions accidentally, I can tell you that that is, of course, a very good feature to have. I deal with a lot of equipment that has magnetic fields around it, and it's screwed up more watches than I can count. So it's a pretty cool thing. This movement in itself is also just really cool. It has an extremely long power reserve when you consider it in comparison to the old Etta calibers they used to use. So this thing actually has a 60-hour power reserve, and part of that comes from the fact that it actually has twin barrels. So you have a wonderful power reserve. And again, you have the coaxial escapement, which is less wear on the movement itself. You have a lot of this anti-magnetic technology that went into it, and the finishing on this too in person is just, it's beautiful. And I would say that this is every bit the equivalency of any other movement you can think of, and then some for the price. I'm struggling to think of a better finished movement for the price of this watch, with the exception of maybe a Glashütte, but I don't even know that I would say that much. But it's a very cool watch. Dimension-wise, it's about 43.5 millimeters, which is a perfect size for, I think, a sports watch. I'd say anywhere from 41 to about 45 to me is a sweet spot for a good dive watch. and you're looking at about a height of about 49 mil, so it's going to wear pretty large on the wrist, but I like that look. And you're looking at a thickness of about 16.5, and you have a standard about 20 mil or so lug width. So you can definitely customize this guy with all sorts of cool straps out there if you like. These things just came out, so I mean, it's amazing to kind of get to see one of these early 8900s in the flesh. There's just, again, like I was saying, so many cool improvements over the old ones. The bracelet feels great, unlike my old one. There's actually screw-out links, which has been a complaint of mine for so many years. They've updated the traditional clasp as well, so you still have the very kind of familiar look of the fold-over, which debuted back in the 90s on my Seamaster. You still have the twin trigger here, which still feels very secure, but they've added some other nice things. So traditionally, like the old ones do, there is, of course, the nice little diver's extension, but you'll also see here that they've actually put in like a glide lock system similar to Rolex. So you'll see where it says push, and you push on that, and you can automatically make a slight adjustment too. So as I've talked about in some of the other videos, especially if you live in a place that's really humid like I do, your wrist can swell or shrink depending on the weather conditions. So being able to add a little bit extra link to the bracelet on the fly is an extremely convenient feature, and it's nice to have, and it saves you the hassle of having to remove or add a link depending on the current weather conditions. So all in all, I'm very, very surprised at how beautiful this watch is. It's nice to see how far Omega has come, and they've addressed a lot of the shortfalls that I remember with these things. I also still like that they're doing a solid brush on these now. The old Seamasters, they used to have some high polish mixed with the brush, and if you're wearing it as a sports watch, that high polish didn't take long to get pretty messed up. So this watch is very much not trying to be anything other than the tool that it is, and it's great for that. So I'll go ahead and show you a quick little shot on the wrist here. And I have just under a 7-inch wrist for those of you new to my channel. Snap it on. And again, you can see it's a little bit chunky at that 16.5. I like my watches chunky, so this actually makes me pretty happy. You might struggle a little bit to get into a dress cup, but I think you definitely could accommodate it. And again, it's just under that 44 mil, but with that 49 millimeter height, you definitely have a really good presence on the wrist. And again, you're kind of seeing those splashes of oranges on the dial as well, which is something very fun and very playful. So, and of course you can see too, there's even this nice transition here between the high polished and the brushed. I mean, all the finishing on this is top notch, and I love the transitions. And I'm blown away that Omega has done such a great job at updating their line and really fixing a lot of the shortcomings that I had with their older dive watches, which, as you guys know, if you know me, are near and dear to my heart. So, well, that said, guys, really hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again to Bernard Watch for kindly letting me borrow more of their toys, and I'm sure I'll be making repeat visits to them in the future to borrow more of their stock. But with all that said, guys, let's go ahead and we'll jump back. So hey guys, thank you so much for watching that review. Like I said, I'm beyond stunned at how much Omega's gone in terms of making improvements from their older line, especially the Seamaster that I own from the 90s. They fixed a lot of my gripes with it. It's really become a whole new level of watch these days, and obviously they've raised their prices accordingly, but it very much is a very different threshold they're playing in now, and the quality is very impressive. So thanks again to Bernard Watch for letting me borrow another one of their pieces. I'm going to, of course, keep taking advantage of this. And I know I forgot last time, guys. Today my customary wristwatch check is I'm still wearing my PAM 287, which I will do a review on at some point, I promise. But thank you guys as always for checking out the review. Let me know what you guys think below. What do you guys think of the new Cal 8900? I mean, do you guys think it's as impressive as I think it is? I mean, like I said, I think it's pretty exceptional. And you know, what do you guys think of the Omega Planet Ocean? You know, what does it speak to you in terms of that versus the Seamaster, the old school, like the one that I've shown the channel before? You know, and how would you guys feel about buying one of those in place of, say, a Rolex Submariner? I'd be curious to see what you guys think below. And as always, guys, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I may not always get a chance to reply to your comments, but know that I appreciate them, and I appreciate you all so much. So on that note, guys, have an awesome day. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Somewhere around here you can, and I'll catch you guys that way on the next video. Thanks so much.